Welcome back to another video on Gearsaw Studios, and today we have 26.3, which completely changes all of building permanently forever, and it is never going to be the same again. This update adds wool stairs, wool slabs, concrete stairs, concrete slabs, LED lights in the form of cushions which can be sat on, and of course the entire autumn forest, which is called the Dappled forest in-game. So you can imagine there's a lot to go through, so let's get right into it. There, you finally have the birch forest update. Of course, it was just concept art originally, but you can see here, the concept art is now possible to add into the game. Of course, it's been 5 years, but hey, you had time to make it important to you, and now you can add shelf mushrooms all over the forest. Additionally, we can completely revolutionize the forest by making some of our trees poplar. You can see we're only changing the leaves. You don't even have to do the interior ones, although I think it looks a little bit better if you make it all consistent. But you can see here, we have a single golden tree in the forest. So let's apply that to the whole forest. Some of them are yellow and some of them are orange, and this provides some much needed variance to it all. It's not that expensive, and it really makes it look like you developed an area. You can even add branches to the trees if they're especially tall. So pretty much, you see the idea, we add shelf mushrooms and we add leaves. Let's take the leaf swapping thing and apply it to a whole biome. As you can see here, we have the beginnings of a custom biome, where all the oak trees have been made orange and all the birch trees red. We can even change out their logs. In a moment, I'll replace all the oak logs with stripped spruce, and I'll strip all the birch logs, and we'll have our own custom biome. While the grass color might not match, it's the beginnings of something that could become an absolutely phenomenal area. So I strongly encourage you to try out some of those palette swaps. You never know, perhaps the mangrove swamp would look interesting if it had all yellow leaves. Of course, I could be wrong, but the idea is we can replace the colors of forest with new, fantastical ones. This nether highway is quite bad. Not only is it not particularly appealing because I was not that good of a builder back then, but slow. And not only that, it's reliant on soul speed, which will eat up my durability. Instead, let's use cushions. Of course, these little guys have been recently added, and they are completely revolutionary. They allow you to sit down. You can only interact with them from up to 3 blocks away, but watch this. Just by holding down right click, you can see how I'm moving quite quickly without expending any hunger. Additionally, you can imagine that a ghast is not going to be able to hit me. But if I spam right click, look at how fast I moved. I can move just about elytra speed without any extra cost. So if I apply this to an entire highway, you can imagine how quick I could be moving. And it's only a few wool blocks. Every 3 wool will get you 2 cushions. Now this one's going to change your worlds forever. Let's start off in the Dappled forest. When we place down grass, this beautiful orange grass, you can see how we have this dirt side texture, which is alright, but I know some of you don't like it. So let's try adding concrete to the edges. As you can see, we no longer need a mod to add grassy sides. Instead, we can manually add it into the build we want while leaving the natural terrain alone, preserving the vanilla experience while making it easier to navigate. So we can apply this to many biomes. Like here, you can see green concrete stairs do absolute wonders for our world. This one's really going to change how you see the game. So this is how I usually build a chair, with a cushion attached now. So you can see, it's a nice thing, a bit regal. Of course, I tried to give a sense of professionalism here. And then we could try something else. We can improve upon this using a wool slab. Alright, we're getting somewhere. However, there's something secret. So you can place a cushion inside of a block. So you can see 2 snow layers, and now I can sit directly on the slab and the cushion is not visible. It can be a little bit finicky at times, but as long as you move your mouse a little, you'll be able to interact with the cushion safely, which means you'll be able to build the best chairs. Combine it with a banner, and what do you know, maximum regalness with a really nice chair. And not only that, the cushion is accurate. So poplar being a new leaf type, a whole new tree, we obviously want to make small versions of it, so we'd probably do something like this. This is a bad idea. Instead, let's look at the log real quick. You can see here how it actually closer matches dark oak. You could kinda do it with mud bricks, but I don't recommend it. But you can see here, by changing up the color and having a fence there to act as a very small stem, we've created something quite nice. we can further texture this with some resin. As you can see here, it makes it look like some varying shades of leaves, or really just a bit of extra texturing on these ones. Now, we can take this to the extreme. Not only can we make small trees, but we can actually stick cushions inside of blocks. By interacting with a non-full block nearby and using snow layers, we can stack 4 cushions into a full block. And you can see here, that worked splendid. We now have red-filled leaves, or in this case, fast graphics. Using the offhand, we can accelerate this further. So you can see here, by pressing F repeatedly on Java Edition, I'm able to build this pretty quickly. And what do you know? This azalea has now been filled with lemons, pretty much. Of course, it will require a bit of practice to actually get right, but you can see this allows you to put cushions inside of blocks quite rapidly. So you can imagine all the applications for this. You could build kebabs, you could put lava inside of grates, things like that. Now, we can actually color the water we have inside of waterways, waterlogged. So you can see here, if I place some cushions, of course, I can now tint the water. It's not perfect, and you'll get varying mileage based off of your biome. As you can see here, in a normal plains biome, it's a lot more vibrant, so you can imagine how this will go. But you can now texture your water like this, even if it's inside of a waterway, so imagine this with shaders. Using cushion stacking allows you to create interesting things such as this Euro meat here. However, there's a little bit more to it. You can actually vary those tall textures by rotating your cushions like this, and you can see the side textures will respond accordingly. I'm pretty sure we can all see this one coming, but there's a little bit more to it. Since we now have wool stairs and slabs, it means that awnings are easier than ever and we don't have to rely on the string carpet trick anymore, which is very nice, probably why they weren't too concerned about floating string. However, we can actually improve this by making sure we use more than just the slabs. With a little bit of trial and error, and using upside down stairs, we can make this even smoother. As you can see here, we now have a much smoother line, so when we extend it up front one and to the back one, it works significantly better, and now we have a very nice food stand. Now, we can do something pretty big for the Dappled forest. We can build a castle, or at least little forts in it. As you can see, stone bricks works very well here, along with poplar wood, since it's a nice desaturated wood. And then, using the hidden cushion trick earlier, we can sit down in a throne. Notice, since we have yellow concrete now, we can properly make a throne here, rather than having to rely on full blocks or gold. Since we have a lot of these building fundamentals regarding 26.3 down, now it's time to actually apply them. Note that poplar and pale are complements to each other, as in one can be the main block and one can be darker. The problem you'll often have with building in the pale forest is because you don't really have a good block to go with the pale, but now poplar exists. You can see deep slate, pale, and then we can have a gray wool roof. All these little things come together to make a very interesting style of build. Remember, if you're building here, your best colors to use for accents would be things like cyan and orange. Right here, we have another little house. As you can see, it's perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with it. There's some acacia on the floor, generally well decorated. However, there's something else. Of course, we have those signs there to make planter boxes, but the roof is the interesting part. Notice how we have a spruce roof, but we can now texture it using some wool and concrete because they now have stair and slab variants. So, be sure to try that out next time you're building with wood. You are now safely able to gradient them without having to rely on only full block roofs. Let's say that we have a mine shaft in the Dappled forest. Instead of trying to theme it with poplar fences, instead try poplar logs plus dark oak fences. As you can see here, the coloration matches much better. Additionally, you can also texture the sides of it if you don't want to do something crazy with some cyan, terracotta, and tuff in order to add a gradient, and you can see how this actually changes the vibe of the build quite significantly. Taking that whole thing about gradienting your stone to the next level, here's something crazy you can do. Of course, the red thing on the sides that I talked about in the intro, make them hang down more, but using some string and varying blocks, you can make a giant gradient to turn your stone brown, and then you can add some honey and weeping vines to further texture it. Then, let's say that we have some mountainous terrain, because Dappled forests love extreme hills. We have some water there filled with mud, seagrass, and a tower here. So let's think about this for a moment. Instead of having to flatten all the terrain, instead, here's something you can do to drastically change the vibe of your place and actually make flat terrain boring and mountainous terrain cool. Because people complain about 118 being too hilly, I can assure you that that is not the case. You just need to work with the hills. So like here, we just add a start and end point, and then we're going to make an arch going downward, and we'll have a nice bridge. So you can see here, with a little bit of adjustment and using some wool, we now have ourselves a rope bridge using poplars and spruce. That way, we can connect our structures together without having to flatten the entirety of the biome. As you can see here, now we can work with much more dramatic terrain shapes. This one's going to be applicable to basically anything, and you could do it from before the update. So we have ourselves 2 towers here. Let's connect them. Using this line of leaves, we can now put our towers together, and then we can put some lanterns on them. Make sure to use chains. You can thicken them up in order to make them look more substantial, and you'll have to go through a few iterations most likely, but this is a massively influential thing you can do to pretty much any town, anywhere there's towers, things connected, and then we can hang some copper lanterns. Notice the blue provides contrast. So we have ourselves something very nice. Imagine putting this at a festival in your world. This is a simple well. As you can see here, tuff and mangrove work very well for that desaturated look, and you can even use cinnabar if you need something a little bit brighter for your biome. You can see we have something pretty rustic here, and the watercolor is kind of interesting. So if you want, add a well. Then we can add some massive crops. Using firefly bushes if you're specifically in the dappled forest, or normal bushes pretty much anywhere else, and then putting a cushion under them, we have ourselves some massive carrots. You can even make fantasy plants with the different colors of cushions and different flowers. We can also make ourselves a wheelbarrow. As you can see here, pretty simple idea. We're going to place down some snow, and then we're going to put a cushion on top and put a composter in it. So what do you know? Different customizable levels of a different color of material. And then this one's pretty big. You can actually build Futuristic with stairs now. And since Futuristic relies on a lot of concrete, you can imagine how this is going to go. To prove this, I'm going to be building an entire Futuristic base simply for demonstration. I will not give you instructions on to build it, it's just a showcase piece. And you can see here, we have ourselves a nice 45-degree angle. And then we can even use cushions here, doing the old cushion trick from the beginning of the video, just like this. We place down the cushion, place down full block. And now we have something with lines going through it. And then we have our big white pieces and things like that coming together to make a really nice little base. So you can see everything's working just fine, and we want to do something like this in the update, because Futuristic suddenly got a lot easier to build. We can even put logos on stuff, we can have little slits of prismarine, we can have this cool carpet there, notice how it's stairs and cushions. All these things coming together make something very cool. And then we can tell a story by including some acacia. This person likes a savanna. So we have all these things, and then a second floor using poplar because it's nice and desaturated. And then footing pieces, we have ourselves some chests, and pretty much we got ourselves a nice completed Futuristic base. Now we have ourselves a poplar tree. I know, very crazy. So we can actually make a few adjustments to this outside of what I was trying to showcase. You can actually thicken up the bottom. When you make the bottom thicker, it makes it look more substantial, and suddenly this looks like a custom tree rather than a generated tree. Be sure to try that. Anyways, to the real thing I wanted to show, we can put leaves on the ground and have them actually match the tree. So you can see here, we have ourselves some cushions, and then we place down some grass. So now we can have pink leaf litter in a completely unrelated biome. Right here, we have the top of a rocket, and you can see how using concrete stairs, we make a finer point. However, using some trapdoors, shelves, and some cushions layered into a wall block and an end rod, we can make pointier points. Using some azaleas and dark oak, we can make a magical tree inside of our dappled forest. As you can see, we are ignoring the biome color by just spraying random azalea on top of dark oak. And then our enchanting table itself, the main thing, cushions can act as carpet here, and they do not disrupt our level 30 enchanting. However, this sword has knockback 2 and must be burned. With access to concrete like this, it means that we can now safely build things that involve large points. As you can see here, I'm building themed around my skin and general build palette, so now we have ourselves something cool. You can try copying that, but pretty much the idea is now you can have nice sharp things poking up and have them be made of concrete so they're nice and undetailed. This would work very well to the background for some sort of Minecraft movie or something like that if you're doing cinematics. Now, right here, we have ourselves a dance floor. It's multicolored, mainly for display purposes, but if it was all white, we'd have pretty much a disco ball. How do we do this? Of course, we have ourselves a redstone clock here, and it's going off with varying timing signals in order to light up some redstone lamps at random times. But not only can we do this, but we can actually modify the color. Since different light levels have different effects on the cushion's actual color, we can use copper bulbs, which are toggleable, in order to change the color. While this works with any light emitting block, so there are hundreds of variations, you only have 4 that are actually toggleable and then 0 for when the toggling is off. But it's pretty easy to build. Horizontal sign, place a cushion on top by sneaking, and then place down a bulb. As you can see here, it's off, but now we turned it on and we have a different color. When using this to change the color, do note that copper bulbs make a sound when turning on and off. But if you use redstone lamps, it's completely silent like we have here. But once you have that, well, it's the end of today's video, and that's your tips for today. If you enjoyed this video, remember, please like and subscribe. We have ourselves a ton of changes today. We have a whole new biome, we have cushions, which completely changes the game. Futuristic building is all over the place now, and we can even do some terraforming in the Dappled forest for an absolutely professional looking area. Either way, enjoy the rest of your day. Gearsaw out.